I've just passed Life in the UK test in under 2 minutes with no wrong answers, and I'm here to help you do the same. With 2 degrees with honours, I know a thing or two about passing exams. So in this video, I'm going to share my tips, tricks and advice on how to prepare for Life in the UK test quickly and effectively. And if you're interested in more videos about becoming legally British and joining me on my journey toward the UK citizenship, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button so you never miss an update. Let's dive straight into it. One of the most common questions I get is, how early should you start preparing for Life in the UK test? Well, I say don't believe anyone who insists that you need 6, 9, 12 months to prepare. It's simply not true. I'm convinced that 1 month is plenty of time to prepare for Life in the UK test if you study consistently. In my case, most of my preparation actually happened in the last 2 weeks, and I never studied for more than a few hours a day. And even then, I definitely over-prepared. Questions were so much easier than I anticipated, but being over-prepared gave me such a sense of confidence, so I walked into the test room feeling calm and ready. By the way, if you would like to find out what happens on the day you take the test, make sure to watch my last video where I shared my experience, and the link for that video will be down below. That being said, I'm a firm believer that over-preparing is so much better than under-preparing. Being underprepared could lead to so much unnecessary stress, anxiety, and even panic on the day, which is definitely not something you need if you want to pass the test. So here's everything I did to avoid it. I used 4 tools that I believe are essential. Tool number 1, the official study guide. If there's just one thing you're going to remember from this whole video, I want it to be this. Every single question in the Life in the UK test comes from the official Home Office guide called Life in the United Kingdom, a guide for new residents. This guide is your core resource. While there are some factual inaccuracies and sometimes even gross oversimplifications in it, for the test you must study it as it's written. Here's how I tackled it. Step 1. Skim through the guide. Honestly, just flip through it, familiarize yourself with chapters, with structure of it, and try to identify areas where you might need a bit more focus. For example, most people struggle with history and find things like public holidays much easier. Step 2, just read it. Read it from cover to cover, but don't put any pressure on yourself to memorize everything. Just get familiar with the volume of information you're going to have to remember later. Step 3. Go through each chapter again, but this time highlight all the key points. Things like dates, names, facts, events, and so on. Focus on the things that you think might be tested. Step 4. Make notes. Before moving on to the next chapter, make sure you write down all the key points that you highlighted earlier. And do it in the way that works the best for you. You can obviously use plain text, but I, for example, prefer using arrows. I prefer create a story for myself where I understand what was the reason for the historical event, for example, and what was the consequence. And this way it's much easier to remember it for me, because I can go, well, this happened, therefore that happened, and because of that, this happened. You know, it's so much easier, especially when it comes to history. Step number 5, arguably the most difficult one, because now you have to actually quiz yourself on what you've written down. So the goal here is that just by looking at your notes, you should be able to recall what the chapter was about, and you should be able to retell the contents of the chapter to yourself, or, which is more effective, someone else. If you struggle and cannot do that yet, just come back to the guide and try again. This method allows you to efficiently review the material without having to read the whole guide again during the revision. Tool number 2. Practice tests. You absolutely must do practice tests. Not only they help you test your knowledge, obviously, but they also get you used to the format of the questions and the style of the test. I would say there are 2 types of practice tests. First type is free. And you can find it by just going into Google and typing something along the lines Life in the UK test. practice tests, mock tests, practice questions. You get it. You'll find loads and loads there. It's a good starting point, but I must warn you, quite a few questions on those practice tests are actually outdated and sometimes quite inaccurate. What do I mean by that? I mean that you might encounter questions about EU, for example, even though UK is no longer a member of EU. Also, you might find that answers for certain questions have changed in the recent years. For example, the question about at what age you are legally allowed to buy a lottery ticket. It used to be 16, now it's 18. And the problem is that those free practice tests maintain that 16 is the correct answer. And if you only rely on those free practice tests, you might go into the actual test, say that it's 16 because it's what those tests told you in the past, and it would be wrong and you might fail because of that. So if any information looks suspicious to you, it's always good practice to double check. Second type of practice tests is paid. Not perfect, but definitely much more reliable than the free tests. For that, what I would recommend is buying one of these books that not only include the official Home Office guide, they also include access to online practice tests. In my book, it was on the last page. I just had to follow this link and register on the website by giving them, I believe it was either a badge code, but probably it was a barcode. So that way I registered my book and I had access to their study platform. There were 20 practice tests and there are also tests for each chapter, so it was quite convenient. I would read the chapter, I would make my notes, I would revise, and then I would go and test myself with that particular test for that chapter. And while we're still on the topic of books, you might notice that quite a few of them come with free paper practice tests right at the back. Mine had 10, and let me tell you, I hated them. The beauty of online tests is that you get instant feedback when you get a question wrong, or even if you get a question right and maybe you just guessed it. So if you got a question wrong, it explains to you what's the correct question and why it is the correct question. And if you got a question right but you were just guessing it, at least that way you get a deeper understanding why that was the correct question. That doesn't exist when you do a paper version of a practice test. So what happens is that, like it's all these questions here, like they would be in any test, but to test yourself, you actually have to go to this page where all the answers are, and having to constantly flip through like that, not only inconvenient, but also gives you a chance to just accidentally glimpse the correct answer for the next question. Don't use those, they're not good. Tool number 3, flashcards. Flashcards are brilliant for remembering two things: dates and names. You can make your own flashcards by cutting a big piece of paper into smaller pieces and using those pieces as flashcards, or you can just order blank flashcards on Amazon or even buy them from your local supermarket. If you've never used flashcards, this is how you do it. You write the piece of information you need to remember, like a date or a name, on one side of the flashcard, and on the other side you write down its significance. For example, on one side you write 1914, and on the other side you write First World War began. Then you can test yourself by looking at one side and trying to recall the other side. And you repeat this process over and over again until you can remember all the details. Creating and using flashcards will help you retain information much better than just reading it, because it requires active recall. And don't be tempted to buy those pre-made flashcards on Amazon, because they are just essentially glorified practice tests, which is not the point of flashcards. Not to mention that they're full of errors and misprints. I ordered this particular set from Amazon, went through it within an hour, realized that about 10% of it is just simply wrong, and returned it the next day. So there you go. The final tool, tool number 4, audiobooks. Audiobooks are a fantastic way to supplement your preparation. While I don't believe they could replace taking notes and using flashcards, I genuinely believe that audiobooks are a great way to review material passively during your daily routine. The reason why audiobooks work is that they are the most flexible tool out of all four that I mentioned today. You can listen to an audiobook absolutely anywhere. You can listen to them while exercising, while walking your dog, while commuting, while doing chores, and all of that without actually setting dedicated study time. And even if you are not an auditory learner, I'm definitely not, but just simply hearing the same information repeated to you over and over and over again helps reinforce what you've already studied. So the more you listen, the more likely the key points will stick. Again, there are two types of audiobooks you can listen. First type is the audio version of the official home office guide. You can obviously buy it through Audible, and it's probably the most reliable way to do it. But if you're trying to save some money or unsure if you want to use audiobooks, there is a free version of the guide on Spotify. It's slightly outdated, but the majority of information is correct and you can just use that. I'll leave a link down below. Second type is practice questions audiobooks. I actually signed up to Audible just to get that one free credit to use on one of those audiobooks, and I quite enjoyed it. The way they work is you are asked a question, then they give you some time to think, and then you hear the correct answer and the explanation. Not much to add here, it's just an audio version of practice tests. So how do you know you're ready to take the test? Well, considering the test consists out of 24 questions and you're allowed to get 6 of them wrong, I would say you're ready to take the test when you're scoring 90% on each test consistently. That's about 2 wrong answers per test. Don't rush into the test. Each attempt costs money, and if you're not prepared, it will be so much more stressful experience than it actually needs to be. Take your time, ensure that you're confident in your knowledge, and then book your test. Otherwise, you've got this. Studying for Life in the UK test can be very overwhelming at first, but if you break it down into small, manageable steps, it will be so much easier to tackle. Do your best, and if you don't pass from the first attempt, that's okay. There is no penalty for failing. You can always retake the test after more preparation. Just keep at it and stay focused. Remember, this is just one step in your journey toward the indefinite leave to remain or UK citizenship. It's a big milestone, but you are not alone trying to get to it. I'm so proud of you for taking this step. Just keep pushing forward and you'll get there. And please share your favorite study tips in the comments to help others. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe and hit that bell button for more useful tips and updates. See you next time. Bye!